Russian forces have taken Pokrovsk, but the Ukrainians aren't out of the woods yet. Just what exactly is the situation inside the Pokrovsk pocket? And more importantly, what is the Russian strategy and how is Ukraine trying to exploit Russian weaknesses? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. If you wear body armor, you already know not all plates are created equal. Today's sponsor, RMA Armament, isn't some Chinese drop shipper. It's not a rebrand of some manufactured overseas armor. It's American-made armor, made by people who know what it means to put your life behind it. The founder is a Marine Corps vet and former law enforcement officer who named the company after his kids because, as we know, the whole point of body armor is to get you home safe to your family. They've been making armor for over a decade now in a 30,000 square foot facility in Iowa using American-made materials and 100% American labor. I actually picked up their XRT plate in the Sappy cut. You notice this is thinner than anything I was issued by the US military in Afghanistan and significantly lighter. But the best part is that this, despite being so much lighter, is rated against almost every mid-size cartridge, almost every full-size standard issue rifle round, and even some armor-piercing rounds. It's made of ceramic, so you're not going to have to worry about spall, and it's available in shooter's cut and Sappy. RMA has body armor from level 3 soft armor all the way up to level 4 rated plates. Bottom line, RMA is doing it right. An American company, American made, built by people who understand what it means to put your life behind your body armor. So hit the link in the description, check out the catalog and videos. They've got some sales, and see why RMA is called the King of Armor. Okay, so first I want to take a look at the map update. Now, Ukraine has actually said that they are actually kind of mad at the people that run this map because they rely on direct reports from frontline commanders about the situation. And this can be at odds and has been at odds with the Ukrainian official high command perspective that there isn't yet an encirclement. And this is actually what they are depicting here. Now, they're depicting that the furthest advances of Russian forces are actually as little as 2.4 kilometers apart. This is a vanishingly small window by which Ukrainian forces can effect any kind of retreat, or Ukrainian forces can resupply. But bear in mind that Ukrainian resupply can be done via drone on a limited basis. And so you don't actually have to own the territory that the drone is flying over. It's pretty useful. But in an area like Pokrovsk, where difficult to identify and almost indistinguishable Russian and Ukrainian drones are crisscrossing the skies above the battlefield, it can almost work to your advantage. Resupply could be going out to Russian positions or Ukrainian positions. So it's possible that Ukrainian drones could literally be flying straight over Russian-held territory, for example, and to resupply, let's say, troops in Suki and the Russians may simply say, oh, there goes our resupply drone supplying troops in Suki. So the resupply is less of a constraint. The bigger constraint is getting out, because physically troops have to go through these areas, have to walk past them. And while, again, the gray area doesn't mean that it's impassable, the fact that there's only a small, narrow window in which Ukrainian troops can operate freely without fear of Russian ground troops. Though bear in mind, guys, a 2.5 kilometer distance window in which Ukrainian troops can pass. This is probably one of the most watched areas on planet Earth right now. There are probably more angles of this being covered than anywhere in New York City, than anywhere in China. No security state can come close to the number of flying cameras watching every square inch of this piece of terrain, because it is so advantageous, right? The Russian encirclement strategy, it's less about Pokrovsk itself. And on one hand, it is about tactically, it's about eliminating the maximum number of Ukrainian units, forcing large numbers of Ukrainian troops, something Ukraine really needs to safeguard, right? It's their most constrained resource, is combat troops. And if they can cut off this last 2.5 kilometers, the rest of these troops will be trapped and will be forced to either surrender to Russian forces or, more likely, be killed outright. And so for the Russians, trapping Ukrainian troops in this cauldron is an essential part of the strategy. Now, you can see that actually Live UA depicts this as being even more critical, with Russian troops with the same 2.5 kilometer window here, very small, but with Russian troops considerably deeper into the west, right? Creating a really, again, a intensely dangerous corridor in and around Mir-Nohad. And the fact that there are still reportedly Ukrainian troops holding out in Suki Yar is insane to me. Truly, truly absurd. These guys, I really don't see any meaningful scenario in which they can withdraw. My hope is that this is simply because Russian troops are here. There aren't actually any Ukrainians, and it's just Russian troops doing like clearing operations. I hope for their sake that there's no troops in this pocket, because it is basically it would be impossible to escape. Now, there's another Russian objective here, and I think when you understand the Russian objective that's at work, you'll understand the Ukrainian objective in turn. And this is what I want to point out, right? First off, I just wanted to make the observation that a lot of this Russian advance has been very, very costly. We talked about the fact that this Russian convoy going towards Pokrovsk, remember the one in the dense fog that was dropped? Reportedly, as the fog cleared, the Ukrainians just flooded Pokrovsk with drones, torching this whole convoy after the fog cleared, right? And again, it got geolocated to an exact spot, literally right here along Pokrovsk. Let's take a look on it on the maps here. But generally, it got geolocated right along to, it looks like, this sort of approach into the eastern portion of Pokrovsk, the town, right? Zipping right along here, you can see this tree line offering some level of cover from drones, which is, again, pretty essential, right? These tree windbreaks are really an essential part of countering drones, because it's not impossible, but it's much harder for a drone to penetrate thick foliage versus an open field. But supposedly the Ukrainians, right, as the fog cleared, Ukrainian drones really sliced these guys to pieces, but not before they could achieve some advances that would have been difficult under any other circumstances. Again, you hope that Ukrainian forces were able to conduct a comparable withdrawal in those deeply foggy conditions, but it's tough to say. So, again, we haven't had confirmation one way or the other. But here's what I wanted to point out, I think is the real story. And that is right here. You see, Gerasimov says that Russian troops encircled Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. But look at the date, October 28th, 2025. This was literally almost 3 weeks ago that Gerasimov went on TV and said, guys, we've got them on the ropes. Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, these guys are cooked. And this is one of the problems with an authoritarian regime. It relies immensely on the projection of strength. But there's a problem. You see, Pokrovsk is not encircled, right? And it certainly wasn't encircled in October 28th. We just pointed out it's not encirclement. It's difficult, but the Russians have not yet completed their encirclement. So the problem is that he went on TV and said it. And in a Soviet-style authoritarian system, because the Kremlin said it, it must become true. This is a incredible weak point in that entire system, because literally, according to the Moscow Times, even pro-war mill bloggers are saying, no, dude, Gerasimov is wrong about this, right? And again, a military, a Telegram channel with 600,000 followers said there are, in fact, no encirclements. In a post entitled, "Enemies have once again infiltrated Comrade Gerasimov's encirclement," the channel said, literally, it's highly unlikely that a multi-thousand-strong Ukrainian force is still entrenched within the Pokrovsk-Milnerhad agglomeration, the pocket. Modern realities are such that fighting is conducted by small infantry units, both in defense and offense. This applies in Kupiansk, where 18 Ukrainian battalions were reported to be in circles. Perhaps Gerasimov is boastful ahead-of-time reports, once again running ahead of the situation, hoping the reality on the ground will soon catch up to his accounts. A different war correspondent called Gerasimov's reporting premature and added that to bring logistics under fire control does not mean to encircle. Again, they're pointing out that just because you've used drones to cut off, to bring logistics, Ukrainian logistics under fire is not the same thing as cutting them off. So the real story, though, to me at least, is that this has to become true. And it had to become true on October 28th, which if you are Ukraine, now again, I'm going to point out, I think this defending Pokrovsk to the extent the Ukrainian military has been in this battlefield situation is a mistake. And I think it's a mistake because, as we've pointed out, the tactical situation is just, this is just not a fight where you are fighting from a winning position, right? If you are going to have a showdown with an enemy, if you are going to inflict maximum casualties, you want to have the battlefield geometry be one in which maximum casualties can be inflicted, right? And to the Russians, right, this is a long way from maximum casualty infliction. And I point out that, again, if you're talking about areas under discrete Russian control, it's still 10 kilometers away from an encirclement, right? But what Ukrainian high command may have chosen, and again, I don't agree with it, but I want you to understand what I think they could be thinking, what a sophisticated general might be thinking. They might look and say, listen, the Russians have made a political mistake because they have committed to this truth. And the mill bloggers, whom they are on a campaign against, have said, no, this isn't true. And so for the Kremlin, it is absolutely essential that this reality of Pokrovsk encirclement must be rendered true at any cost. And that last part, at any cost, no matter what, the Kremlin must become right. The Ukrainians say this is a tactical mistake because Ukrainian tacticians, Ukrainian generals ought to have a mentality of, listen, we're going to make the best decision we can, but there is nothing sacred. There is no thing that is so important, right, that we are going to force it into reality. But the Russians, they say, they've just said that. They've just said they're going to do whatever it takes. And so maybe the Ukrainian generals have said, listen, we think the Russians are going to put way too many troops in one little area, that they're going to deploy way too many forces here. They're going to concentrate everything right in this area. And it's an opportunity for us to just buzzsaw them down again and again with drones. Just keep just enough troops in here to keep the fight going. And then you just absolutely buzzsaw them with FPV drones over and over and over and over again. And the Russians will never stop putting troops into this thresher because they have committed to saying that the thresher doesn't exist. Think about it like this. Imagine someone says the wood chipper out back doesn't work. It is turned off. There is no way. And so you say, great, so I could put your troops into the wood chipper and nothing will happen to them? They say, of course, no problem. So then the Ukrainians go, so I can put as many troops as I want in the wood chipper. He goes, yeah, because the wood chipper, the Kremlin lie, the wood chipper doesn't work. So the Ukrainians go, great, they fix the wood chipper, it's out back, it's running, and then they get the Russians to just feed more and more troops. Hey, can I take more troops back to the wood chipper? They go, of course. And deep down, the problem is that deep down, the Kremlin knows they're feeding troops into a wood chipper. Troops they, in some ways, may not even have. But the Ukrainians go, listen, we need to exploit this loophole in the Russian system that says that nobody can ever admit defeat. Nobody can ever admit they made a mistake. And so they say, well, let's just keep the wood chipper running as long as possible. That's my generous thesis. Again, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's necessarily I don't know. I don't know how true that is, but that is my best guess as to Ukrainian high command strategy, to basically make it look like, get the Russians to publicly commit to saying, listen, We've got Pokrovsk on the ropes. We have got them encircled. Stand by for our victory in the great town of Pokrovsk, truly one of Ukraine's great cities, 60,000 residents before the war started. Right? And the Ukrainians say, great, 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 great. Wow, what a critical encirclement we're in. And then the Russians pour troops in, and the Ukrainians just buzzsaw them to nothing. That's my thesis. Again, I'm not party to the internal Ukrainian math. My sort of hope is that the Ukrainian tendency of brigade commanders to underdeploy infantry is actually working in their favor. That even the Ukrainians may be operating. If the Ukrainians believe there are infantrymen in those positions, then the Russians certainly will too. Again, imagine, for example, a Ukrainian commander that knows there are no Ukrainian positions in Suki-Yar, let's say. They go, listen, there's not any troops here. Maybe there were a couple weeks ago. We haven't heard from them. Their positions have been totally vacant. But they say, you know what? Let's just keep dropping logistics into, let's say here, just some random buildings. Just have logistics packages run, drop them there. And then the Russians go, damn, look at it. They're still running logistics to these positions. There must be Ukrainian troops here. And so then the Russians have to go house to house, and they get torn apart by drones, and they can't get there, and and it's a whole fucking to-do. And then finally, they go building by building, clearing the towns, and then go, damn, there were never any Ukrainian troops here. They were just dropping logistics into random houses for absolutely no reason. That would be fucking hilarious and be kind of brilliant. And it may be a strategy actively being pursued by lower level commanders who are literally lying to their own high command and also lying to, and therefore tricking the Russians. I hope that. I mean, again, this may be like fantasy or maybe like cope. But again, we're seeing some videos coming out of Pokrovsk of troops fighting, so I don't think this is entirely true. But it would be pretty funny if the Ukrainian tendency to just understaff infantry positions is actually created a operational disaster for the Russians. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thanks to our sponsor, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.